the National Assembly, and President Guaido. Any violence against these groups would signify a grave assault on the rule of law and will be met with a significant response.
Today, Treasury took action against Venezuela's state-owned oil company, PDVSA, to help prevent the further diversion of Venezuela's assets by former President Maduro. The United States is holding accountable those responsible for Venezuela's tragic decline. We will continue to use all of our diplomatic and economic tools to support interim President Guaido, the National Assembly, and the Venezuelan people's efforts to restore their democracy. PDVSA has long been a vehicle for embezzlement, for corruption, for Venezuelan officials and businessmen. Today's designation of PDVSA will help prevent further diversion of Venezuela's assets by Maduro and will preserve these assets for the people of Venezuela where they belong. The path to sanctions relief for PDVSA is through the expeditious transfer of control to the interim president or a subsequent democratically elected government who is committed to taking concrete and meaningful actions to combat corruption. Today's actions against PDVSA follows my determination that persons operating in the Venezuelan oil sector may now be subject to sanctions. Today, OFAC also issued a number of general licenses that authorize certain transactions and activities with PDVSA for limited periods of time to minimize any immediate disruptions and support of ongoing humanitarian efforts. Citgo assets in the United States will be able to continue to operate, provided that any funds that would otherwise go to PDVSA instead will go into a blocked account in the United States. Refineries in the United States have already been taking steps to reduce their reliance on imports from Venezuela. Those imports have fallen substantially in recent months. We have also issued general licenses to ensure that certain European and Caribbean countries can make an orderly transition. We continue to call on all of our allies and partners to join the United States in recognizing interim President Guaido and blocking Maduro from being able to access PDVSA funds.
We want the Venezuelan security forces to know how strongly we think that President Guaido, the National Assembly, the opposition, and most importantly, American personnel are not harmed. This is an unequivocal statement on our part. Look, the President has made it very clear on this matter that all options are on the table.
Welcome here.
Judge, thank you for inviting me.
How bad was it? How oppressive, how totalitarian were the events of 6 o'clock in the morning last Friday?
This was almost a surreal experience, Judge. At 6 o'clock in the morning, there was a pounding on my door. I was sleeping on the second floor with my wife, who is hearing impaired, virtually deaf. I came downstairs to open the door, staring down the barrel of 2 assault weapons. There were 29 FBI agents in SWAT gear who had completely surrounded my home. There were 17 vehicles with their lights going, including 2 armored vehicles in the front yard, in the front street. They had blocked off the entire street. How a CNN camera crew got there, I'm really not sure. I live on a canal. They had pulled 2 amphibious units with frogmen up to the back gate, to the back of the house. The entire back of the house was surrounded by agents, all of them brandishing sidearms and assault weapons pointed at my home. I do not own a gun. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, but I do not own a gun. I do not have a valid passport. The idea that I would destroy evidence, I've been under investigation for 2 years. I've destroyed nothing. But if I was going to destroy evidence, why would I wait till last Thursday? The judge gave me a surety bond on my signature, proving I'm not a flight risk. I was told to come out with my hands up. I did. I was told that I was under arrest. No one read me my rights, I might add. I was told to put my hands behind my back. I was wearing a Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong t-shirt. You can get those at 1776.shop. The proceeds go to my legal defense fund. I was wearing a pair of shorts, but I was barefooted. They said, "Who else is in the house?" I said, "My wife." They said, "Who else?" I said, "My wife, that's it." They said, "Are you sure?" I said, "I'm positive." Plus 2 dogs and 3 cats. I'm a dog lover. I'm an animal lover. You can read my activities for animal welfare on Daily Caller.
Right.
I was afraid that they would go upstairs, think my wife was not complying to an order that she could not hear, and shoot her.
Did they take your wife out of the house, Roger?
They did. I was made to stand in the street, handcuffed in my bare feet. They brought my wife out in her nightgown, also in bare feet, to stand next to me, even though she's not accused of any crime. They told me they had a search warrant to search the premises. They also had a search warrant to search the InfoWars studio that I use in Oakland Park, Florida, as well as a warrant to search an apartment in New York that I no longer have because the lease is up January 31st and all my possessions had been already shipped back to Florida.
Okay, you have competent counsel who must have had some communication with Mueller and his crew. Why do you think this extraordinary, over-the-top show of force? Why didn't they just call you on the phone and say, or your lawyer on the phone and say, "Can Mr. Stone, he's been indicted, can he appear at 8 o'clock this morning before a magistrate?"
Yes, they knew who my counsel was. They had communicated with my counsel. They knew that I would have voluntarily surrendered gladly because I would have been a lot better dressed for my mugshot photos. But instead, they want to intimidate me, and they want to poison the jury pool. They treated me like El Chapo. They used fewer men to take down Pablo Escobar or Bin Laden. So by treating me like a drug kingpin, they send a message to potential jurors that I'm public enemy number 1. I'm a non-violent man. I'm a libertarian, and I'm against violence. I'm against war, for that matter. So this notion of this over-the-top display of raw power, it was meant to not only intimidate me, but intimidate certain witnesses in my case who they're counting on to bear false witness against me.
One of the allegations against you is that you intimidated a witness. What is your defense to that?
Completely out of context. I intimidated nobody. Now, the witness in question, Judge, threatened to put a bullet in the head of an exculpatory witness who went before the Mueller grand jury, who is a friend of mine. He also threatened to have a woman falsely accuse me of sexual assault. This is a witness who lied before the grand jury, said he was not my source for the significance and October timing of the WikiLeaks disclosures. I released 30 pages of text messages that prove that I was truthful and that he lied. You won't read it in the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal. So that is completely out of context.
There are five counts leveled against you for lying to Congress. Do you have in your possession the transcripts of what you said to Congress, which the grand jury claims constituted the 5 lies?
No, I'm by law not entitled to have a copy of my testimony. My lawyers can inspect my testimony in a sealed room at the House of Representatives, but they are not allowed to take notes. I think there's a due process issue there. They have reviewed it. I believe that I was truthful. That is a distortion of my testimony, but Congressman Adam Schiff and Congressman Eric Swallowswell have been beating this drum for a year. They will be both called to the stand and they will be vigorously questioned, as will other members of the House Intelligence Committee, such as Trey Gowdy, someone I have huge respect for, to see if they believe that I was less than truthful. This is a distortion of my testimony. Clearly, I cannot rebut every charge here because there's just not enough time.
Right.
But I will plead not guilty. and I have substantial documentary evidence to refute every bit of these charges.
Since the indictment came
that
down,
special
Roger.
counsel's
Right, since the indictment came down, have you heard from the president?
I have not, other than reading his tweets. I think people understand that the president has been advised by his lawyer and some of the deep staters on his White House staff that he's not to speak to me. My lawyers have suggested it would be better off if I did not speak to him. If I may preempt a question that was asked all weekend. No, I have not discussed a pardon with anyone. I have publicly advocated a pardon in op-ed pieces for Julian Assange, who I think is not a Russian asset, but a journalist doing what all journalists do. I have written the president advocating a posthumous pardon for Marcus Garvey, the early civil rights leader who I think was railroaded by the FBI in the 20s, but I've never discussed a pardon with anyone.
Do you envision any end to this other than a jury trial?
Not at this time. I mean, they judge shopped. They had this assigned to Judge Amy Jackson Berman, who was the hanging judge in the Manafort case. They do that by trying to connect this to the 17 Russian case, in which I was cited as having communicated with Guccifer 2.0, an ex post facto communication 6 weeks after the WikiLeaks had already published the Hillary Clinton emails. The content, context, and timing of that communication demonstrates that it is entirely legally benign. It's innocuous. Even in that indictment, it says no American knowingly communicated with the Russian, no American has violated the law, but they use that to get me in front of the same judge, their judge, an Obama appointee.
Does the government believe that there was a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and foreign nationals, whether it's Julian Assange or whether it's Russians, and that you were integral to that conspiracy? Because if they believe it, they didn't charge you with it.
No, they do not allege that. I'm not charged with conspiracy. I'm not charged with Russian collusion. I'm not charged with WikiLeaks collaboration. I had no advanced knowledge of the source or content of the WikiLeaks disclosures. I played no role whatsoever in their dissemination or their release. Any information that I did relay to members of the Trump campaign was public information published in the newspaper or broadcast on TV. Julian Assange announced to the world on July 22nd of 2016 that he had material on Hillary Clinton and he would publish it. He said it again on Fox on August 24th. This was not a state secret. Everything that I communicated, which was extremely minimal, and some of which I frankly forgot, was public information. No secret there.
Do you see yourself cooperating with Mueller in any way? You sort of dropped that hint yesterday in an interview on ABC.
Well, I think that's a bit of a bastardization of what I said.
What'd you say?
What I said was, I will tell the truth to Mr. Mueller. If I'm asked, I will tell the truth. I have told the truth consistently, even though some would say otherwise, but that they are incorrect. So if cooperating means I won't plead the Fifth Amendment, I will answer questions. I'm happy to answer questions. I don't know what else he may be investigating. I mean, if Steve Bannon did something wrong and I know anything about it, I would be more than happy to say so. I don't know that Mr. Bannon's done anything wrong.
Will you talk to Mueller's people about your communications with the President of the United States and with Donald Trump before he was president?
I see no reason why not to. There's nothing inappropriate or illegal or wrong with those communications. They're innocuous or they're political in nature. Donald Trump has been a friend of mine for 40 years. I have deep affection for him and his family. He attended my wedding to my wife, Nydia. I was at two of his weddings, to Marla Maples and to the First Lady, who I think is a wonderful person. I have deep affection for his children. I knew his parents both very well. I attended their wakes and funerals. I had a high regard for his brother-in-law, who is an excellent attorney in New Jersey. I have a huge affection and respect for his sister, who's a fine federal judge. There's never any discussion between the president and I of WikiLeaks or the WikiLeaks disclosures. Now, I did hear Wolf Blitzer say the opposite yesterday, but Wolf Blitzer is not a journalist.
Right.
Wolf Blitzer is a bald-faced liar.
All right, you mentioned New Jersey. Shortly after your interview with George Stephanopoulos, the former governor of New Jersey, Governor Christie, had this to say about your current legal plight.
I think if he decides to go to trial, he's in very, very grave danger. Everyone is presumed innocent, George, and so is he. But the indictment, I think, is a pretty damning indictment.
Chris Christie know anything about this indictment other than what the words are on the pages?
I don't know how any lawyer could understand the indictment without reading the full transcript of my testimony to see how out of context these annotations are. I think that's irresponsible for a member of the bar, but count on Chris Christie to kick him in while he's down.
Jerry Corsi, whom you and I both know, told Ari Melber, the legal analyst at MSNBC, plans to testify against you. What is he talking about? Do you know?
Yes, Dr. Corsi has maintained two falsehoods about me, none of which are contained in this indictment. He says that a memo he wrote me regarding the Podesta brothers' lucrative business dealings in Russia was meant as a cover-up for the fact that he had told me that Podesta's emails had been stolen. That is false. There's no evidence that corroborates that other than the alcoholic haze of his memory. It is categorically false. It's also illogical. My tweet regarding the Podestas, which is consistently edited by the mainstream media.
Right.
Even the New York Times, I said the Podesta brothers, that's two people, the Podestas, a time in the barrel will come, referring to the fact that I was going to try to disseminate to the media accurate information about their Russian business dealings. There was no reason for a cover-up. My tweet was not controversial for 6 weeks until WikiLeaks did publish those Podesta emails. Dr. Corsi, I think, had this suggested to him by the special prosecutors. He also says that I knew in advance about the NBC Billy Bush tape, the famous grab them by the genitals tape, and that I urged him to contact Assange and tell him to somehow change or time his disclosures. That is also a whole cloth. That is completely false.
Last question. Do you think that Mueller and company believe that they can squeeze you as they did Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, Mike Flynn, George Papadopoulos?
Well, yes, because I think they have tried to destroy me financially. That's why I need people to go to stonedefensefund.com. For 2 years, they have leaked that my arrest was imminent, my indictment was imminent, and that has destroyed my business. In December, I lost my health and life insurance, unable to pay the premiums. I liquidated a small fund I had for the college education of my grandchildren. I had to sell my car. They have dried up my book sales through the censorship of InfoWars, where we're fighting a horrific fight against censorship because Alex Jones is one of my most articulate defenders, and because I have a platform there every day at 5 o'clock Eastern. And therefore, if I'm broke enough, perhaps they can make me like Mike Flynn, where I finally plead guilty to a crime I didn't commit because I don't have the resources to fight. That's why I appeal to people to go to stonedefensefund.com, because I intend to fight if I have the resources.
First, I am announcing that a grand jury in Seattle has returned an indictment that alleges 10 federal crimes by 2 affiliates of Telecommunications Corporation Huawei Technologies. According to the indictment, in 2012, Huawei began a concerted effort to steal information about a robot that T-Mobile used to test mobile phones. In an effort to build their own robot, Huawei's engineers allegedly violated confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements with T-Mobile by secretly taking photos of the robot, measuring it, and even stealing a piece of it. I'm also announcing today a grand jury in New York has returned an indictment alleging 13 additional crimes committed by Huawei, its CFO, its affiliate in Iran, and one of its subsidiaries here in the United States. The criminal activity alleged in this indictment goes back at least 10 years and goes all the way to the top of the company. As early as 2007, Huawei employees allegedly began to misrepresent the company's relationship with its Iranian affiliate, which is called Skycom. Huawei employees allegedly told banking partners that Huawei had sold its ownership interest in Skycom, but these claims were false. In reality, Huawei had sold Skycom to itself. By claiming that Skycom was a separate company and not an affiliate of Huawei, which it actually controlled, Huawei allegedly asserted that all of its Iranian business was in compliance with the American sanctions. These alleged false claims led banks to do business with the company and therefore to unknowingly violate our laws. One bank facilitated more than $100 million worth of Skycom transactions through the United States in just 4 years. Huawei allegedly lied about other relationships as well. In 2017, when one bank decided to terminate its global banking relationship with Huawei over a concern about risk, the company allegedly told other banks that Huawei was distancing itself from the bank, not the other way around. Huawei allegedly did this in an attempt to, among other things, manipulate those other banks into expanding and maintaining their banking relationships with Huawei. There are additional troubling allegations in the indictment as well, including that Huawei lied to the federal government and attempted to obstruct justice by concealing and destroying evidence and by moving potential government witnesses back to China. As has been widely reported, in December 2018, Canadian authorities arrested Huawei's CFO in Vancouver. In compliance with our request for her provisional arrest pursuant to our extradition treaty with Canada, the United States is currently seeking her extradition. We are deeply grateful to the Government of Canada for its assistance and its steadfast commitment to the rule of law. I want to repeat that these charges in today's indictments are only allegations, and the defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty. In a few moments, U.S. Attorney Donahue and First Assistant Hayes will provide more details on today's indictments. But let me just say two more things. First, when a bank's customers lie to it about their sanctions-related business, that exposes banks to the risk of violating the law, especially when they continue to provide those bad actors access to our U.S. financial system. And second, as I told high-level Chinese law enforcement officials in August when I visited their country, we need more law enforcement cooperation with China. China should be concerned about criminal activities by Chinese companies, and China should take action. We are proud that the United States has the strongest economy in the world. I believe that it's no small part due to our respect for the rule of law. Criminals and bad actors can be certain that they will not get away with criminal activity. But those who do business in the United States can also be certain that the Department of Justice will protect them from criminals, no matter how powerful or influential they are. I think we have shown that today, and we will show that as these cases move forward.
Good afternoon. The charges unsealed today are the result of years of investigative work by the FBI and our law enforcement partners. Both sets of charges expose Huawei's brazen and persistent actions to exploit American companies and financial institutions and to threaten the free and fair global marketplace. As you can tell from the number and magnitude of the charges, Huawei and its senior executives repeatedly refused to respect U.S. law and standard international business practices. Huawei also intentionally and systematically sought to steal valuable intellectual property from an American company so it could circumvent hard-earned, time-consuming research and gain an unfair market advantage. In pursuit of their commercial ambitions, Huawei relied on dishonest business practices that contradict the very economic principles that have allowed American companies and the United States to thrive. And there is no place, none, for this kind of criminal behavior in our country or in any other committed to the rule of law. The prosperity that drives our economic security is inherently linked to our national security. And the immense influence that the Chinese government holds over Chinese corporations like Huawei represents a threat to both. As Americans, we should all be concerned about the potential for any company beholden to a foreign government, especially one that doesn't share our values, to burrow into the American telecommunications market. That kind of access could give a foreign government the capacity to maliciously modify or steal information, to conduct undetected espionage, or to exert pressure or control. And these cases make clear that as a country we have to carefully consider the risks that companies like Huawei pose if we're going to allow them into our telecommunications infrastructure. Today's charges serve as a warning that the FBI does not and will not tolerate businesses that violate our laws, obstruct our justice, and jeopardize our national security. We will not stand idly by while any entity, whether it's a foreign government or corporation, seeks to criminally or unfairly undermine our country's place in the world.
Good afternoon. Let me thank the Acting Attorney General and everyone behind me for the collective work here today. As you heard from the Attorney General, this afternoon in the Western District of Washington, a 10-count indictment was unsealed, charging trade theft, charging wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and forfeiture. The indictment in the Western District of Washington reveals just how determined Huawei was to steal T-Mobile's trade secrets, how clearly Huawei knew that what it was doing was wrong, and just how far Huawei was willing to go to get the technology it wanted. As set forth in the indictment, our evidence includes numerous emails between Huawei USA and Huawei China over a period of months, showing a determined and unrelenting effort to obtain T-Mobile technology. In this case, a robot, nicknamed Tappy, that T-Mobile used to test mobile phones to ensure they met expectations in the marketplace. As alleged in the indictment, the emails show that Huawei wanted to build its own robot, and rather than engineer its own device, it decided to steal T-Mobile's technology. What do we allege that Huawei did? T-Mobile had given Huawei employees limited access to Tappy to test Huawei's phones, but only subject to agreements strictly prohibiting any conduct to obtain Tappy technology. The emails clearly show a determined Huawei doing everything it could to get what it was told it could not have. Huawei entities snuck into the Tappy lab with folks who were not authorized to be there. Huawei entities directed employees to take photographs, take measurements, and take other protected information without permission. And finally, when all this still did not get them what they were looking for, they tried to steal Tappy's robotic arm in order for engineers in China to replicate it. To make matters worse, when confronted, Huawei obstructed justice by preparing a report claiming to be an investigation of rogue employees, when Huawei clearly knew that the thefts were part of an organized effort by the company. In fact, as the indictment details, this was the way Huawei operated. This was Huawei's MO. During the time period of the alleged crimes, Huawei announced a bonus program for its employees worldwide, that it would pay cash to employees for stealing confidential information from competitors. And yet, and very tellingly, within days of this offer, Huawei USA sent an email to its employees acknowledging this conduct would be illegal in the United States. Let me end by emphasizing, as the Attorney General did as well, our indictment contains allegations. Huawei, like every defendant in a criminal case, has the right to due process, including a trial. We look forward to proving our case beyond a reasonable doubt and holding Huawei accountable for its actions.